Hello everybody, this is the first episode of a new series, Features Showcase. In each episode I will talk about a specific feature of DaDaBIK, and in particular I will focus on the newest features introduced in the version 10 Manarola and version 11 Elba. Features that at the moment are not covered by video tutorials here on YouTube. The idea is to publish a new episode every 2 weeks. If you want to keep updated on all the episodes I will publish, click on subscribe if you're not a subscriber already, and then hit the notification bell on YouTube, selecting the option all. This first episode is about Live Edit, a feature introduced about 5 months ago in DaDaBIK 11 Elba. And to record this episode I will use version 11.2, which at the moment is not available yet. It will be very soon. It is still under test, but since it contains several improvements about Live Edit, I think it makes sense to use it here. The graphic layout in this 11.2 version has also changed a bit, so if you are using version 11.1 and you feel it's different from this one, well, that's true. What I'm showing you is a preview of what you will see very soon. As application, I will use an application that is similar to the Sales Manager application, which is one of the demo you can see in the demo page of our website. Okay, let's start. So the idea about Live Edit is to make the edit process faster. The classic approach to edit a record in DaDaBIK is I click on the edit icon, I modify something, and then I click save or save plus back. When you have to do a little modification on one field, it would be faster to edit directly from the results grid. That's what Live Edit allows you to do. Similarly to what happens when you use a spreadsheet. This approach is also called inline edit. You can also hear other similar names for the same concept. So let's say I notice a little typo here in the name of my customer. I double click on the name, I modify it, and I press enter. That's it. It's faster, right? It is faster, but almost all the characteristics and rules of the standard edit are implemented in the Live Edit as well. For example, the validation. Let's say I only want to accept letters in the name field and I want the field to be required. Let's configure it. So edit this application, name customer, alphabetic, and the field is required. Let's try to leave the field blank. I get an error, because of course it's required. As usual, all the messages can be customized if you don't like the default one, and you can specify a different translation for each language if you are building a multi-language application. Let's try to add numbers here, and I also get an error. Something I didn't mention before, when you double click a text box appears, then you type something and maybe then you realize you actually don't want to modify, and maybe you don't even remember what was the original value. That's fine, you just press the escape key on your keyboard and that's it. Before talking about the other characteristics of Live Edit, I want to mention more in details when you can use it. This feature has been introduced in, as we said, in version 11 Elba, and well, with a lot of limitations, so you could use it only in some cases. Now many of these limitations have been removed in version 11.2, the version, again, I'm using right now. But there are still some limitations, but hopefully at some point will also be removed. So on which fields you can use it? Text fields, text area fields, date and time fields, non-lookup select single and select single radio. Let's see an example for each of them. Text field, well, the name we already tried before. Let's look at these three fields instead: notes, card, and date registered. Let's see the standard edit form. So notes is a field we use to add some notes about the customer. It's a text area field. Card, let's say we have a card that we can issue and some of our customers have it. That's a radio button, yes, no. Date registered, it's a date field. You select the date from a date picker. Okay, that's the standard form. Let's go back to the results grid. So, with name, as you probably remember, when we double click, we get a text box. With notes, we get a text area field instead. Let's add some text. And again, with enter, we save. With alt plus enter, I can add a new line. Card. Card is a radio button. At the moment in the live edit, it is not rendered as a radio button, but as a normal text field. You have to enter the value manually. What happens if I type something that is not in the list of the available options? For example, I type hello. If drop-down security check is enabled, and by default it is, you get an error. So it is safe from that point of view to use radio buttons, non-lookup radio buttons in live edit. Finally, registration date. If I double click, I can choose the date from a date picker. I select the date, then again enter to save. If I want to remove the date, double click, I press backspace, then enter. So let's recap when you cannot use the live edit. Rich editor. So if you have a rich editor field, the one you use to add HTML content, you cannot use live edit. And probably doesn't make much sense to use live edit for this kind of fields. The select multiple fields. The file fields, so if you have to upload a file, you have to use the standard form. The select single lookup fields, and when I say lookup, as you probably know, I'm referring to select single fields, both the drop-down menu and the radio buttons field, for which you take values from another table. The kind of fields we typically use for one-to-many relationships. What happens if you try to use live edit on one of these fields? Country, for example. Country is a lookup field taking values from the countries table, so live edit is forbidden here. If I double click, I get this error. Again, of course you can customize the message if you want. So I open the standard edit form and I edit country from there. By default, live edit is enabled. It wasn't until version it wasn't in version 11.1, but after a few months and considering the improvements, I thought it was time to push the adoption of this feature. So until version 11.1, by default, enable live edit is 0. Starting from version 11.2, enable live edit is 1. And this is global. This means that for all the situation for which live edit is not forbidden, it is allowed. However, using the new allowed fields live edit parameter, you can also decide to allow live edit only on a few fields. And to do it, you must keep the parameter we saw before, enable live edit, enabled, so equal to 1. But if the second parameter, allowed field live edit, which is an array, is set, then only on the fields you specify there, the live edit will work. Here, live edit is available only for two fields: name customer in the table customers and price product in the table products. So basically you have to specify table name and then field name and set the value to 1, which means for that field, enable it. You don't need to set to 0 all the other ones. It's implicit that all the other fields, except the ones you have here, are set to 0. Apart from the fields I mentioned, there are other situations where you cannot use live edit. You cannot use it for tables having custom validation functions, custom display required functions, or calculated fields. Let's try to understand why and if there is a way to overcome this limitation. So, why you cannot use live edit in certain situations? There are a couple of reasons. You can find more details in the documentation if you want. Here I give you just an example. Your custom functions might trigger a value change in a form field or make a field disappear. For example, let's say we have a field price plus taxes, and it's a calculated field. It takes the price field and automatically adds taxes according to your custom function. This works like a charm in a form. You change the price, automatically price plus taxes changes, but this at the moment doesn't work on the result grid. So if you have such custom function, DaDaBIK will forbid live edit on that table and you have to use the standard edit. But again, using allowed fields live edit, you can overcome these limitations and tell DaDaBIK to allow live edit even if you are in a situation where normally live edit is forbidden. Let's see this code. So as you can see, instead of 1, we set the element to 2, which again means for this field not only allow live edit, but allow it even if the table is not compatible with live edit. So I guess you are wondering when you should use this setting. Well, if you decide to use the value 2, you should really know what you are doing. Let's make an example. Let's say that in the table products you have a calculated field, the price plus taxes field, the field we mentioned before. And because of that, DaDaBIK forbids the use of live edit on this table. Let's say you don't have other custom functions on this table. This is the only one, okay? Well, this function does not impact on name product, right? The function impacts on two fields, price and price plus taxes. So it would be perfectly fine to use live edit on name product here. In this specific case, so it is safe to set the value 2 for products name product for our array allowed fields live edit. So basically you should evaluate case by case when it makes sense to use the value 2. Live edits at the moment have a few other minor limitations. For example, the tooltips at the moment don't appear Let's see what happens if I move my mouse pointer on name on the standard edit form. I get a tooltip that I set in form configurator. This doesn't happen in live edit. This is just an example. I suggest you to check the documentation for the details about the other minor limitations. Let's see the other characteristics of the classic edit that still work with live edit. Required validation, content type validation. We saw an example before with the name, so I don't need to show anything here. While record locking, this is an important topic to discuss. How does it normally work and how it works in live edit? Let's say I want to edit this record, and let's simulate concurrent access. In this application, as you can see, I'm logged in as Bob. I opened another browser. I logged in using another user Alice. If I try to edit the same record, I get this message, okay? That's record locking. There is an entire video about record locking that discuss the topic in general. You can find it in the Low Code Corner playlist. So if you are interested, you can view it. But here we want to see the implications when we use live edit. So let's go back to the grid here with user Bob. The lock is released, so Alice can now modify the record. In fact, if I reload the page, I don't get that message anymore. Now Alice is the one who is locking the record because she wants to modify it. What if now Bob tries to modify the record but using live edit? Let's try. And as you can expect, the behavior is exactly the same. In fact, the same code used by the standard edit for record locking has been used by live edit as well. If Alice releases the lock, then Bob can modify it. Okay? It is safe as the standard edit. Can this be improved? Yes. I mean, technically, with live edit, if two users are accessing the same record but different fields, it doesn't make sense to forbid the edit, right? However, this would introduce several complications in the code. And considering that typically live edit is a very fast process, so you don't keep the record locked for a long time, I analyzed cost and benefits and I thought it was much better to reuse the code already available exactly as it was. Revisions, that's another aspect to discuss. Revisions also work exactly as they work with standard edit. So let's try to do a couple of changes to this record. Then I click revisions. Here we go. These are our revisions with all the details, user, date, time, current content of the record, and so on and so forth. Hooks, before and after update hooks. With before and after update hooks, you can execute some custom code immediately before or after the execution of an update. For example, I don't know, you modify the quantity of product included in an order. If that happens, you want the system to automatically update the quantity in stock for that product. That's a typical situation where an after update hook would be useful. Before and after update hooks also work with live edit. They didn't in version 11.1, but they will do in version 11.2. The only thing you should consider when you use before update hooks is that normally the before update hook receives an input, among the other things, an array containing the values of each form field. So the user fills the edit form, clicks on save, the before hook function you wrote receives in input an array containing all the field values submitted from the form. In live edit there is no form, right? Only one field is edited each time, but you still receive in input the array of values. The thing to consider is that DaDaBIK reads those values from the database and not from the form. So, well, for you as a developer, it's completely transparent. DaDaBIK will reproduce what you typically get with a standard edit. There are just two cases, select multiple fields and file fields, where what you get in case of live edit is slightly different for technical reasons. All the details, again, in the documentation, in the operational hooks chapter. Email notifications or email notices, as they are called in the DaDaBIK documentation. In particular, I'm talking about update notices, the ones you can enable using the configuration parameter enable update notice email sending. If you enable them, DaDaBIK sends to a list of addresses that you can specify an email message with the details of the record just updated. Again, this works both in standard edit and live edit. Finally, JavaScript events function. As you know, using the form configurator, you can specify one or more JavaScript functions you want to execute when something happens to the corresponding HTML field element. So, for example, you can say that when the user releases a key, you want DaDaBIK to execute DaDaBIK capitalize. That is a JavaScript function you wrote to convert all the letters in uppercase. Okay, let's see what happens in the standard form. As you can see, after having typed a character, the whole content becomes uppercase. And if I continue with typing, as I type, don't know if you can see it, but I'm typing in lowercase, but each letter is automatically converted in uppercase. Let's see what happens in live edit. Exactly the same thing. Your JavaScript functions are safe. However, please keep in mind that if in your JavaScript functions you referred to some elements of the page, for example, another field in your form that existed in the standard form but does not exist in the results grid, well, then you can get errors and unexpected behaviors, of course. So my suggestion is to review your existing custom JavaScript functions to see if they are fine with live edit as well. And that's it for today. Next episode will be in 2 weeks. If you have suggestions for features you would like to see in this series, please write your suggestions in the comments. Ciao!